this. So, oh, boyfriend in the back. All right, everybody. Well, like I said, I am so excited for this masterclass personally, selfishly, because I met Kiley probably about 2 months ago through a networking group, and we got on a Zoom call and just hearing how she supports her clients and how she thinks about business entrepreneurship, setting yourself up for success long term so that you can create something that not only is sustainable for the lifestyle that you desire to create, but also, if you desire to, is set up for you to take more and more of your time back. And I think that that is so valuable because, especially in this space, we can oftentimes be very much, what's the next move? What's the next move? What's the next move? And what I've found is that when you begin to make longer term moves, longer term decisions, that's really when you're starting to shift the way that you think and make more aligned decisions that are going to support you 5 years, 10 years, 15 years down the road. So Kiley, thank you so much for coming into our community. I am so grateful, and I will let you take it away from here.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Ava. I'm super pumped to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Give me just 1 second here. Alrighty. And we've got a lot we're going to cover today, so I'm going to do my very best to get through as much as I can for everybody. Ava gave me a heads up on some of the things that are like most exciting and most pressing issues for everyone. So we're going to do our best to give you all kinds of value. Let me also say that Ava will be monitoring the chat. So if anybody has any questions as we go through, please drop them in the chat. We're going to do our best to try to answer them as in a couple of different spots throughout the presentation. But worst case scenario, we'll try to tackle as many questions as we can at the end. Alrighty. So as Ava mentioned, we're going to be talking about building a business that really allows you to live the life that you want. We all know that entrepreneurship is not an easy path, but it can be wildly rewarding, and it can also run the risk of us becoming somewhat slaves to our business sometimes. So we're going to talk about how that can change. I want to just take a moment to introduce myself. Hello, I'm Kiley Peters. I am a serial entrepreneur. I ran a digital content marketing agency for 6+ years and decided I didn't want to do that anymore. So now I run Rain 9, and we are an executive leadership consultancy. And we help women be great CEOs and leverage entrepreneurship to build the lives they want. If after today you want to hear more of my voice, the good news is that we have opportunities to do that. I have 2 podcasts, one called Welcome to Eloma, which Ava will be a guest on shortly. And I recently launched another podcast called Make Business Personal. And this is a weekly podcast with like very short episodes and like tangible business tips. So again, if you want more of me after today, good news is readily available. All right, so let's jump into this. Let's jump in. 100,000 hours. Does anybody have any idea what 100,000 hours stands for? If you have any thoughts, anything you want to toss in the chat, like go for it. Oh, Ava's got this. Okay. All right. So 100,000 hours. I did some rough math, and 100,000 hours is roughly the amount of time at a minimum basis, especially as we're talking about entrepreneurs, that you will likely spend working in your life, assuming an average age of retirement of 66. 100,000 hours. Now that's the equivalent of like working nonstop 24/7, 365 for 11 and a half years straight. That's a lot. It's a lot, right? And I don't know about you guys, like I love the work I do, but there's a lot of things I could think about doing with 100,000 hours of my life. But the reality is that we spend a lot of our time working to afford the lives that we want to live. But life is short, you guys. Right now, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but right now the average life expectancy of the US is actually dropping. It's 76 years old. 76 years old. So if we are waiting to retire until we are 66, that means that we've got like 10 years left to live after we retire, which is bonkers. So that means that we need to be living now, not like running our lives and building our businesses and then waiting someday for some magical date of retirement. We need to be living now. And I believe if we're going to spend this much of our time working, that we really should be making business personal. Now, how do we go about this, right? How do we go about this and where do we start? Well, we start by defining success. Now, in order to truly be successful, we need to be really honest with ourselves about what we actually want. And I don't mean what our friends and our families have told us we're supposed to want. I don't mean what society has told us we're supposed to want. I mean what we actually want. But what do we want, right? What do we want? Like, we are all different people. We all have different wants, different needs, different aspirations, different passions, different dreams. We are not the same. And therefore, we can no longer accept this universal definition of success because success, like business, is deeply personal. Now, I know this because at the beginning of 2021, this was me. This was me at the beginning of 2021. We did a photo shoot. I looked all shiny and new thanks to whoever edited this. But this was me at the beginning of 2021. And I was super focused on making my agency at the time wildly successful. And to me, that meant more people, higher revenues, higher profit margins, all of the things, right? And it was more and more and more and more. That's what success meant in my mind at that point. And I was making moves to make it happen. I was hiring people, I had international clients, I was doing all kinds of great stuff, right? But the reality is that I was living a double life. You see, in one life, I was leading this agency. I'd been running for the past 5 years with dozens of team members, international clients, numerous accolades and awards. But in this other life, I had started this consultancy, taking on more strategic business projects. And that was the work I really, really wanted to do. Now, I had a few decisions to make because I realized what was being expected of me was not aligning with the life that I wanted. And I think I was binge watching Ted Lasso at the time. So I don't know if we have any Ted Lasso fans, but highly recommended. But our good friend, Dr. Sharon Fieldstone, showed up and she said, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off. And this isn't the first time I heard this message, but it was exactly what I needed to hear at this time because it just hit me like a ton of bricks, right? I realized like I had been really dishonest with myself most of the year because I was living a life that didn't feel aligned, didn't feel truthful. And I knew I had to get honest with myself. It took me pretty much the entire year of 2021 to get to the end of the year and realize like this is not the life that I wanted. And I realized that on the other side of a fabulous crash and burn, like I went down blazing. But as we do as entrepreneurs, we pick ourselves up, right? And I got excuse me. I got really honest with myself and I got really clear on what I wanted and I quieted down and I really looked inward. And for the first time, I think in my entire life, I really defined success for myself. And I got really clear on who I was, what I wanted my business to look like, and therefore how I wanted my business to support my life. And for the first time, I flipped the script on everything so that I could build my business to support the life I wanted. Because I really believe that we need to first do the internal work and define success for ourselves as individuals first. And then we need to align our work and our businesses to that personal definition of success in order for us to live the lives that we want. Now, you might be saying, okay, Kylie, cool. How do I define success? Well, the good news is I'm about to tell you. I've created a framework I call the DNA of success, the definition and alignment of success. And at its core, this framework is pretty simple. I ask you to first define success for yourself as a whole human being, and then align your business and the work you do to that personal definition of success to build the life that you want. But as I mentioned, it does require you to get really honest with yourself, and that's not easy, and that's harder for some people than others. But it can change your life, and if you haven't already started to do this work, I highly recommend it because it's so important. And because I want you guys to all live your best lives, I'm going to give you the keys to the castle. I'm going to tell you how we go about this. So first, we define success for ourselves, and there's 4 different stages. So I very carefully crafted this to give us the acronym SELF. But the first phase is significance. And so I'll talk about that in just a second. The second is energy. We talk about how you spend your time and energy. The third is leadership. So how are you going to lead yourself and others to get to where you want? And the fourth is facts. So this can be a very emotional process, but at the end of the day, what are the facts? And then we align the work we do to those things. So we go through this first on the personal side, and then we ask similar questions of the business. So the main questions we're asking at each stage of this process: 1, what makes you significant? Both as a human being, why do you exist? What's your personal significance? Why are you here? And then we ask the same questions of the business. And some people will call this like a mission or a vision or a purpose statement. Same type of thing. What is the significance? What's the impact of the work that you're doing, right? And who do you serve? And then we talk about energy. So how are you spending your time and energy? As a human being, how are you spending your time and energy? How should you be spending your time and energy? How to optimize your time and energy? And then from a business standpoint, how should your business be spending its time and energy? Really, what problems should you be solving, and how should you be solving them? What's the most efficient way to go about that, and what's best suited for you? When we get to leadership, I'm asking you as a human being, what do you want? What do you want? Because if we cannot name the things that we want, then it's pretty difficult to get them, right? And from a business standpoint, we're asking, what do you want? Yes, but how are you going to lead yourself and other people to make these things all come to fruition? And then, like I said, at the end, we're going to talk about what are the facts. And we have a fancy little acronym for that. But what are the facts in terms of how do we take inventory of what we currently have? What do we need? What do we need to know? What are the gaps? What should we be prioritizing? And because Ava mentioned that there's a couple specific things that this community would really like some insight on, I'm going to give you a quick rundown of how we go through defining success. And then I'm going to jump into these 3 topics. So first, how do I create and price my first offer? Then we're going to jump into how do I generate leads? And then we're going to talk about how do I close new clients? So buckle up. Here we go. All right. So phase 1 in the defining success matrix, the DNA of success. What makes you significant? Why do you exist? Who are you meant to serve, etc.? Now, there's a lot of different frameworks for doing internal work like this, to do internal, like defining success for yourself, naming a personal purpose. If anybody has done any of those work, like please drop it in the chat or give me like a little hand. There's a lot of different frameworks, and I'm not here to tell you any of them are better or worse than whatever. I think whatever works for you works for you. But in doing this work for myself, I think there's a shortcut. And I found it a couple of years ago when I was reading Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty. And he said, serve the pain you know best. Now, I know that's not the most uplifting statement, but if you think about it, we've all experienced a lot of life, right? We're grown-ass women. We've all experienced a lot of life, and it's beautiful, and it's painful, and it's ugly, and it's amazing, right? Like, there's so much, but we've all experienced a lot of pain, and it's been my experience that most entrepreneurs I know have started their business because they wanted to help someone like themselves, however they label that, right? Someone like themselves go through something that they went through, they got to the other side. It was an awful experience, and they wanted to help make it easier, better, less painful for the people that come after them, right? And as we go through this, like it's easier to see why you do what you do when you have this internal insight in terms of what that looked like for you. So I want to tell you just a quick story about myself and kind of how this shows up for me now in my business, in hopes that it gives you a little starting point so you can kind of take a look at yourself and reflect on how that's showing up in your business right now. So for me, what I found was I was told that I wasn't enough all the time, and I needed a man to provide for me. So let's go back to Kylie at age 18. I was serving breakfast at our local country club, and I was serving breakfast in the men's only room. Now I could go on a whole tangent on why I was not comfortable with that, but that's for another conversation, right? So I was doing my job. I was serving breakfast to this guy at this country club, and asking him what you would like for breakfast, taking down his order. We started chatting a little bit. It's the summer before I started college, so he was just asking me about school, and I was so excited, and I was telling him all the things that I was so excited about, and things I was learning, and people I wanted to meet, and adventures I wanted to have, and all of the things. And I was just so excited for this next phase of my life. And he says to me, he goes, "Oh, don't worry about that. Just marry some man for his money." And I thought he was joking. I was like, "Oh, what a funny guy." And so I laughed and I said, "Oh, well, I would like to think that there's a little more to marriage than money." And he goes, "No, seriously, just marry some man for his money." And I was like, "How would you like your eggs?" And that was the first time that I can remember at age 18 being told that it did not matter what I wanted. It did not matter what I was or was not capable of, but that, like, just marry some man for his money and it'll solve all of your problems. And that went on in many different ways throughout most of my 20s. I was told by former bosses that my opinions didn't matter because I was plain vanilla. I was told by former roommates that I had to move home after college because, duh, what other options did we have? I was told by former boyfriends that I wasn't ladylike enough. I wasn't nurturing enough. I was too loud. I was too quiet. I asked too many questions. I wasn't enough of something. I wasn't capable enough of something. And don't worry, a man will fix all the problems. Now, I'm not sitting here saying I hate men because I don't. Some of them are wonderful. Some are not my favorite, but some are wonderful. And I say that because when I came across this quote a couple years ago, I realized that I needed to make a career shift because this pain I knew best was a bunch of was being told that I wasn't enough, was being told that whatever my dreams were didn't matter. And I knew that, and I knew that this wasn't true because I was fortunate enough to be raised by parents that told me I could become anything I wanted. But yet I was still internalizing a lot of this negative talk. And then I started thinking, well, what about all these other women who are being told this, but don't know that they are still capable of doing all of the things? And so I realized that my personal purpose, my personal significance, the thing that I wanted to plant my seed in was I wanted to help women realize that they can do anything that they want. And while entrepreneurship is not the right path for everybody, those who do want to take that leap into entrepreneurship, I want to help them succeed because I think entrepreneurship is one of the best vehicles to own your time, own your life, own your capacity, own all aspects of everything and your impact, right? And I wanted to help make that path a little easier, better, less painful for women who are journeying on that. And so that was my journey, right? So taking a look back at, what experiences have really made the most impact on you and what themes are you finding, right? What is the pain you know best? And if you're able to name that, I mean, we're talking to a bunch of business owners already here, but my guess is if you're able to name that, you'll be able to see quite an interesting bridge into the work that you're doing now because it's rooted in something deep, right? And also, I think you have to know this work because this is tough. Running a business is tough. And if we don't really cling on to our why, it's really easy to not get up the next day to say, I'm tossing in the towel because this is too hard. But when we really believe in the work that we do, it really propels us forward. So how does this now show up for me in Reign 9? Now I get to work with all of these amazing women all of the time. This is a picture from a retreat we did last year, and it was amazing. Like we had all these women show up. We did this 3-day retreat, and now I get to be helping women in all shapes and sizes and all places in the world, right? So we are doing in-person retreats, we do virtual masterminds, we do all kinds of stuff, and now I just get to take this purpose and bring it to these women and help them build their businesses. So we build life-changing companies. We help them build life-changing companies to align with their personal goals and values. We help them be great CEOs so they can build their businesses in alignment with the lives they want to build. So my question for you is, how is your business currently in alignment with your personal significance? And what pain do you know best? Right? You don't have to put it in the chat right now. But you can, to Ava's point here, you can name, like, how are you helping people navigate their pains right now? So what pain do you know best? And how does this currently align with your personal significance? So how does your business and your personal significance currently align? All right, so we're just going to skim through this. That question alone can sometimes take years to answer. So if you're like, oh gosh, I don't know, that's okay right now. But put it in your back pocket and start thinking about it, right? The second thing that I want to move on to is, I apologize, the weather congestion is just doing a good job on me right now. The second phase here is energy. So how should you be spending your time and energy? What problems should you be solving, and how are you going to solve them? So when we go through these processes and these phases and the work that we do, just to clarify, we do all kinds of exercises. So I'm just giving you like a little bit of a glimpse on each one of these. But the number one exercise I love doing in this phase, we call it LEDs. So leading energy drainers and drivers. Now, this concept is influenced by LED light bulbs. So if we take a look at LED light bulbs and traditional light bulbs, in theory, they produce about the same amount of output, right? For the most part, they do, right? Except an LED light bulb can produce the same amount of output with only using, it can use up to 90% less energy and last up to 25 times longer. That's what Google told me, at least. So it can use up to 90% less energy and last up to 25 times longer. So think about this when it comes to your personal energy. If we were to really double down and focus on the things that drive our energy versus drain our energy, if we just use the same amount of energy, our 100% of energy, say, and we focus on the things that really light us up, we could, in theory, 10 times our output by using the same amount of energy. So think about that for just a second. What would that look like if you 10 times your output, but you're not exuding any more energy than you currently are? Like, that can change things, right? So the exercise that we go through here, and what I would encourage you to do when you have a moment, take a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. On one side, write drainers, on the other side, write drivers. And I want you to go through and think about everything that you're doing personally and professionally. So oftentimes we'll like put that in a matrix. So it'll be like split that piece of paper into 4, right? Personally and professionally, what you're doing that is currently draining your energy. So whether this is picking kids up from school, meal prep, strategy, admin tasks, paperwork, whatever it looks like, right? Whatever you're currently doing on a regular basis that is draining your energy, write it down. There's no right or wrong answer here. And there's a lot of creative things that we can realize between the personal and professional lives. That's why we put it all in one place. So write it all down. And then on the driver's side, write down all of the things that drive your energy, the things that you get lost for hours doing, that you can't stop talking about at dinner parties. And people are like, yeah, you should stop talking about that. People are sick of hearing you talk about that thing. Yes, all of those, right? For me, it's like real awesome, nerdy spreadsheets. Like, I love me a good spreadsheet, or gardening, like I love listening to audiobooks as I garden, and I also love nerdy spreadsheets, right? So, and strategic planning and dreaming of possibilities and all the things that it could be, right? Those are all things that just light me up. So take a look at these two things. I want you to then take a look at all of the drainers and circle everything that you know somebody else could do just as well, if not better than you. And I want you to start thinking about delegating that. Now, I know we oftentimes have a lot of trouble and challenges with delegation, but I'm going to tell you, in many cases, you cannot afford not to delegate because you are wasting your precious time and energy doing the things that are draining your energy versus lighting you up. So I want you to identify all the things that you could potentially start to delegate, and then I want you to think about starting to delegate them. Another quick story here. This is my client turned now colleague, Amanda. In 2020, she came to me and she was looking to exit her business. And so we took a look at, what's going on. And on paper, she's killing it, man. She has 7 figures in revenue. She's got 8 employees. She had a huge warehouse. She was working with some of the largest clients in her industry. And they kept asking for more and more. But the reality was that she was working like 70, 80 hours a week. She was totally underpaying herself. She had some debt she was paying off from COVID loans. And that was really bogging down on her. And so I talked to her. I was like, okay, tell me what's going on. She's like, I really don't want to manage people anymore. It's draining my energy. We've got some huge clients, but I don't know how much money we're actually making on them. Some of them we might be paying them for them to be a client of ours. And frankly, I'm just kind of ready for the next thing, right? I've been running this business for a decade. I'm just kind of ready to move on. And so we went through and we took inventory of how she's spending her time and energy. We did a profitability analysis to see how she's making money in her business and how she should maybe not be trying to make money in her business. So we created processes, we created efficiencies for her. We were able to hone in on her most profitable clients, fired a couple not profitable clients, and downsize her team. And so after doing that, we were able to help her not only get clear on what she wanted to do and what the next steps look like for her, but we reduced her headcount by 50%. We increased her profit. Now, we all know revenue is a vanity metric, but profit, we increased her profit over 300%. She was able to spend up to 75% less time in her business. She was working like 20 hours a week, not even knowing what to do with herself anymore because she had so much time on her hands. And she was able to double her personal income. So again, taking a look at how we are utilizing our time and our energy and really finding ways to make that more efficient and maximize and optimize that can lead to incredible results. So my question for you here is, what are you currently doing that you shouldn't be doing? And this is not the blame or shame game, but just be honest with yourself. What are you currently doing that you shouldn't be doing? Because taking an hour of rest is not lazy. Taking an hour of rest can actually help you double or triple or whatever your output is, because you're giving yourself the time and space to do the thing that you are uniquely capable of doing. Okay, we're going to keep moving on here. The third phase of this process is L for leadership, right? So what do you want and how are you going to lead yourself and others to make it happen? And then when do you want to make it happen? So we're going to talk about this in 3 specific categories. So first, we're going to talk about this personally, then financially, then professionally. So personally, this is the most important one because everything builds off of this, right? So personally, what do you want? I love asking people this question. I especially love asking women this question because oftentimes it's a really difficult question to answer. And a lot of people have not actually taken the time and energy to be able to name this. And that's okay. So if you're finding yourself saying, I don't really know, that's okay. This is an opportunity for you to start thinking about what this looks like, right? So I want you to think about personally, what do you want? What things do you want? How do you want to be spending your time and your energy? What experiences do you want? What do you want mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually? What state of being do you want to be in? Do you want to be very intentional? Do you want to be calm? Do you want to show up energized? Do you want to be the ever optimist? Like, what do you want out of this life, right? Do you want to climb Mount Kilimanjaro? Do you want to be at every soccer game? Do you want 3 sports cars? Do you want a new lake house? Do you want to take the month of July off and travel? Like, what do you want, right? Name those things because when you get clear on that, it allows us to then help you build your business to support that life. Now, while we know that the best things in life are free, many are not. And so the next thing that we want to talk about is what are those financial goals and benchmarks and milestones you need to hit in order to make your personal goals and benchmarks happen, right? So financially, what do you need? What do you need? And this is where I always recommend, if you're not already working with a financial planner, find a CFP, Certified Financial Planner. They're a fiduciary and they'll have your best interest in mind because they legally have to. Ask them, what is the number I'm trying to make here? This is the life I want to have now that you know your personal goals. This is the life I want to have. What is the magical number? And then we can start to backtrack into how we get to that point, right? Like, what do you need to be saving for retirement? What different financial goals do you have? Are you doing investment properties? Blah, 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 right? What are those financial goals and benchmarks and milestones? And then because many of us make our money through the work that we do, what are those professional benchmarks and milestones that we need to hit, not just to fulfill us as an individual, but also to make those financial goals happen so our personal goals can happen. This is a great opportunity if you say you want to write a book or launch a podcast or whatever that looks like, become a thought leader in a certain space. Definitely put those in this category. But then we should also be taking a look at like how is that going to support the financial future of yourself and your business, and therefore the life that you want, because it's all rooted in what you want as an individual. Now, I'll tell you one more quick story here. I was working with a client a couple years ago, and I asked her, "What do you want?" And she got emotional and started to cry. And I was like, "Okay, well, what's going on here?" She's like, "No one's ever asked me that." This woman is in her mid 50s, had been running a CPA business for over 30 years, had raised 4 children almost single-handedly, brought up her younger sister, and was killing it in so many different ways of life. And no one had ever asked her, "What do you want?" So talk to your friends and give them the space to name that, and do the same for yourself, right? So after we started to have this conversation, she's like, "I've loved my career. I love the work that I do, but I'm really tired and I'd like to move on to something else. I love to keep a handful of my clients and move forward and just do tax strategy work. But she had, I think, over 700 clients in her CPA firm. And she's like, this is too many. I like to just downsize and just do this work. And my husband and I have been saving, and I would just love to build my dream house on the Tennessee River. And that would be really nice." It's like, okay, awesome. Let's talk about it. And then I will tell you, about 18 months later, I was sitting right next to her at dinner one night when she found out that she got the plot of land she wanted on the Tennessee River. So again, yes, yay for her. We have to name the things that we want, right? There's a lot of research that shows that by naming the things that you want and writing down the things that you want and telling other people about the things that you want, it increases the likelihood of making them happen. So, what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? Not what are you supposed to want? What do you want? And how are you going to make your dreams come true? Getting really clear on who you are and what you want, and making a plan and telling people about it. That's how we make dreams come true. So, take that time and identify that for yourself. And the last section here of this framework, and then we're going to jump into all these fun questions, right? Business questions. What are the facts? Again, this can be quite emotional, but what are the facts? And we also have a framework that we talk about this. What are the financials, the attitude, the content, the team, and the skills you need? So we talk about taking inventory here. But the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this is this quote by Dan Sullivan, who, if you have not read any of his books, they're all great. I've read 10 times is easier than 2 times, The Gap and the Gain, and Who Not How. They're all great books. Highly recommend all of them. And he wrote an entire book, Who Not How, on this one concept. Oftentimes it can get really overwhelming and we can feel like this is all on us, right? But it's not, right? So if we go back to how we optimize our energy, who, not how. All you need to figure out is who you need to hire or partner with or surround yourself with, and let them figure out how it gets done, right? In many cases, you need to figure out what needs to happen and who needs to be the person to do that, and then let them figure out how, and trust that process, right? So what do you need? What do you need to know? And then the last question I'll ask you right here is, what is important now? What is important now? The acronym there is WIN. What's important now? And I think that's really important too, because oftentimes our to-do lists have dozens and dozens of things on them, right? But if we get really honest with ourselves, we say, no, these are the 3 things that need to happen today. Like, these 3 things need to happen today. All right, then that's where you focus, right? And getting really intentional like that helps us build a much more fulfilling life. Okay. I have, if there's like one question, we'll take one question. If anybody has one question right now, and then we're going to jump into all of the business questions. So, Ava, I don't know if anybody put anything in the chat, but there's one question that anybody has that we want to talk about? We can do that now. Otherwise, we'll just jump into things. Go ahead.
Yeah, a real quick question just on the topic of energy drainers and even on what you had just shared around like who, not how. If somebody is earlier on in business and there's certain things that they have to do to get their business off the ground, and maybe they don't have the funds to be able to invest in a VA yet or someone else to come in, what are your thoughts on that stage of entrepreneurship where like if you want to build an online business but you don't necessarily love creating content and it's an energy drainer, but you kind of have to if you want to create an online business, how do you suggest and approach those energy drainers that we kind of have to do at certain stages of business?
Yep. I would say work smarter, not harder. And in many cases, I get people asking this all the time, like, oh, I don't have enough money. I can't hire a VA. I go through an exercise where we map it all out, like the cost of you doing this work versus the cost of paying somebody else to do this work. And oftentimes the math is just through the roof because the amount of value of your time is typically 3 to 5 times or more that of what you would typically pay a VA. So if you think about, okay, how am I really spending my time and energy? Should you be the one that's scheduling every social media post? Should you be the one that's filling out all of the paperwork? I mean, yes, sometimes there's a balance, right? Like maybe you can't afford a VA 20 hours a week, but you could afford one 20 hours a month, right? Even that is going to free up some of your time and mental space. And the other thing that I want to just toss out there too, we talk about like time in terms of the hours in the day, the hours in the week, etc., right? I was talking to a client the other day, and she's like, oh, I'm working with this client 10 hours a week, but they are taking up way more than 10 hours of my energy. And so I want you to think about that too, because it's not just, okay, I'm spending an hour doing this work. It's also probably, I'm spending 5 hours of frustration and angst, and I'm just sitting in this because I really don't want to do this work, but it only takes me an hour to do. What are you losing in that? Right. So I think it's a balance of that. And then I think there's also like a lot of technology that we can leverage to try to make that smarter. I mean, AI is taking over the world. I'm not saying like run your business solely by AI. That is not what I'm saying. But it can save us some time. So that's what I would say right now. Cool. Okay. We're going to dive into these next 3 questions that I promised I would tackle. And it's a lot of content. So here we go. Okay, first question is how do I create and price my very first offer? So I think that there are 4 things you need to do in order to make this happen. 1, you need to know your audience. 2nd, you need to know the problems that they will pay to solve and or the aspirations that they are seeking to accomplish, right? You need to then productize your services to create the best solution. And also, let me back up. You need to know the problems they have and the aspirations they want to solve. And you need to identify and like Venn diagram that with the ones that you actually want to solve. Then you need to create the best solution for that problem. And you need to know your numbers and you need to know the profitability of the products that you are creating, right? So I'm a big proponent of like create the best solution versus trading time for money as much as possible, because you don't get more time. You don't get more time. So if the only way you're building your business right now is trading time for money, you're going to max out. And it's also a quick path to burnout. So that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about audience and problems right now. So the way that we talk about identifying your audience, a lot of people will be like, oh, a 25 to 45-year-old Caucasian woman that lives in the suburbs with 1.5 kids and a white picket fence and a minivan. Like, okay, that doesn't tell us anything about anything, right? So we talk about demographics at the end of this conversation. We start with the things that matter most to them. So we talk about their activators and their values, like what motivates them, what are their psychological differentiators. We talk a lot about like, maybe political beliefs are in here. Maybe they want to change the world. How do they feel about XYZ topics? Like these are the things that really get them moving, right? This is really how they make decisions. Then we take a look at their behaviors. right? How do they behave? How do they show up? Are they quick decision makers? Are they the only decision maker? Are they online? Are they offline? How much time do they need? Do they have to gather all the information? Where do they congregate? So this is where we take a look at how do they behave. Then we talk about conversion triggers. So conversion triggers are what happened that made them realize they need to find you, right? So this is also a great anchor for marketing. So what happened that they then went to Google and were like, I'm searching for XYZ type of company, right? So oftentimes this can be seasonality. This can be the new year, new trends, new goals, etc. Sometimes it's major life events, life milestones, whatever that looks like what happened that made them realize that they need to find someone like you. And then lastly, we put in demographics because sometimes this is relevant. So if you say, I'm only serving women or I'm only serving this geographic area, etc., sometimes that does make sense. So we take a look at what that looks like. And so as we take a look at all of these different factors of understanding our audience, sometimes that can get overwhelming. So I've created kind of a little bit of an equation to map those things together. So you don't have to use all of these sectors if they don't make sense for you and your business, but we just want to make sure that we're not oversimplifying things. So we talk about this audience definition equation, right? So this optional qualifier, sometimes this is like executive or ambitious or driven or whatever that might look like. The key demographic, who wants or seeks this thing that matters most to them by means of or because this behavior and this conversion trigger, right? So for Ray 9, we look for and we target executive women who want to own their time and live the lives they want by launching and leveraging their own business, right? So for us, if you're not interested in entrepreneurship, we're probably not the right fit for you because that's really what we focus on. If you're not a woman, you're also probably not really in our key demographic. And if you're like, yeah, I just want to make all of the money possible and I don't care how my time is spent, I don't care about anybody else in my life, it's also probably not the right fit for us because we're really focused on people who want to own their time, own their lives, make the world a better place through the world of entrepreneurship. So sometimes it's helpful to just kind of put these all into an equation. Again, you don't have to use every single one of these. Feel free to delete them if they don't make sense for you. So as we talk about identifying our audience, one of the things that, and I have a deep marketing background, so one of the things that I think a lot of people fail to do oftentimes is they tend to identify with their audience and they say, oh, I am my ideal audience. So therefore, everything I think and feel is exactly what my ideal audience thinks and feels. Or my favorite is like, the rich old white men who run every single company and they're like, oh, I know this audience, and they just reference like their personal experience. No, the best thing that you can do for yourself and your business is to go talk to this audience that you identify. And so I'm asking you to go do audience research. So here are a few questions that we've drafted up and that we've included in some of the programs and educational content that we create. Biggest things to keep in mind when you're doing audience research is make sure you're asking open-ended questions like what and how, and make sure that you're not inserting any unnecessary bias, right? So you don't want to say, oh, I know, I totally agree with that. Don't you hate it when that happens? Now you're confirming that you're on the same side and that could influence some of their responses, right? So you want to ask these open-ended questions. We want to talk about like, what are some of the challenges that you're running into? Let them talk, right? You can always say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more, and dig in deeper, right? To get to where you need to get. You can talk about like, what resources do you have? What do you still need? What are some of the fears that you're experiencing that are holding you back from solving this problem or moving forward? What do you need to feel confident? This is where they might say, I need this dollar amount. I need this time span. I need these case studies. I need to talk to 2 different references, whatever it looks like, right? But this is one of my favorite questions is if I could wow, words. If I could wave a magic wand, like what would this ideal solution look like? Let them tell you exactly what they want. Most of the time, they've gone through this. It hasn't worked. They haven't solved this problem yet. They're looking for a specific type of solution. Let them tell you what they want, right? And in a perfect world, you end up delivering that. And then asking them what kind of investment they've made in this, like this in the past, also lets you know if they're actually a good target audience for you. Because if they have not put a dime to this problem in the past, maybe they're not going to put a dime to it now. And maybe you're wasting your time and energy, right? So go out and talk to your audience to get really clear on the problems that they have and go in with an unbiased view, right? You don't want to go in and say, like, I think that this is my hypothesis and I'm looking for everybody to prove me right. That's not the way you want to be doing this customer research. We want to make sure that you are understanding the problems people have and are willing to pay to solve. And then we take a look at the problems that you want to solve. I love this quote by Albert Einstein because we really talk about finding the solution or building the solution is really built off of understanding the problem. So if you're not getting clear, you're not understanding from your target audience what the real problem is, then you're probably building a solution that does not work for them. Or if you're finding yourself right now and you've built a solution and it's not selling, it's probably because it's not rooted in the problem that they want solved in the way that they want it solved. So take a look at that. I call this like the sweet spot finder. Take a look at your audience's problems, the problems you want to solve, and then your unique ability. What are your unique strengths and what do you uniquely bring to the world? What's your personal significance? How does that play a role here? And use those things to build your productized services. I have this little white triangle around this. They should all be contained within your true specs. Now, true specs is a word I made up. And this is what it means. So your true specs is what you uniquely believe to be true and necessary for the work you do to be successful for the people you serve. Now, again, I have a very deep marketing background, and I've heard from so many people, you know, in this space, you might say like, well, how is my yoga studio different than somebody else's yoga studio? How is, you know, my breathing practice different than somebody else's breath work, right? What does that look like? My response to you is you have to be willing to be different. If you want your business to be different, you have to be willing to be different. And that means you have to be willing to dig deep inside yourself and ask yourself, what do you uniquely believe to be true and necessary for the work you do to be successful for the people you serve? I do not mean what are best practices, because in theory, that is what everybody should be doing, right? But what do you uniquely believe to be true and necessary? We believe that in order for women to have autonomy over their lives and to build the lives that they want, that they need to define success for themselves first, and then they need to align the work they do to their definition of success. And that is everything that we do, right? So everything we do as a company is filtered through that lens. First, define success for yourself. Second, align the work, right? And so everything we do is through that lens. Now, if you believe in that, then great. Then we might be a good fit for you. If you don't believe in that, then we're probably not the right fit for you. And that's okay, because somebody else is going to be a better fit for you, and that's going to be a win for everybody, right? So identifying your unique marketing messaging and positioning, we call that your true specs. Okay, so if you haven't started to do any audience research yet, this is just like an accountability thing for you. If you want to maybe toss a number into the chat, okay, Kylie, you're right. I need to talk to some of my audience members. Like, go ahead, toss it in. No worries if everybody's just like listening and like can't type right now. No big deal.
Can I
But
ask
that's the
you real quick?
yes.
For
Yeah, go
anybody
ahead.
who's like, okay, I have never done this before, I should do this. What is the best way to go about actually conducting this audience research? Do you just suggest maybe like if somebody has an Instagram, like posting an Instagram story and saying, hey, I want to talk to people in my audience, or do you recommend actually like finding your ideal client online, sending them a message and reaching out to the people that look like your ideal client?
Good question. I would say I think it depends. If you were to post something out there in the world, I would make sure you add the caveat of like, this is who I'm looking for, because what you don't want is you don't want to be spending your time or somebody else's time interviewing somebody that's not actually your ideal audience. So if that's the best way that you have to find these people, then I think that's okay. What I always would recommend is to do it via Zoom if possible and record it, because you're going to be or you should be so focused on the conversation in real time that I don't want you to worry too much about taking elaborate notes. Ideally, you're in real time listening to the conversation, asking good questions to probe deeper, and then you go back and you rewatch it and you take notes and try to pull out the patterns. Because if you've gotten really clear on who your audience is, you should start to see patterns between like 5 to 7 interviews. And around like 5 or 6, you start to see, oh, okay, people are starting to say the same things. There's some research that shows that interviewing like 5 to 7 people, you get around 80% of the insights that you do from interviewing 15. So in my experience, because we used to do this work in my agency as well, usually around that 5th or 6th interview, you start to hear people say the same things. Now you need to ask them the same questions. You need to ask the questions in the same ways. But yes, I think going about that, sometimes be mindful of who your audience is too, right? So if your audience is like Fortune 500 CEOs, their time is really precious. If that's the case, then you might need to offer like a gift card or like an incentive, unless you have a great relationship and you can bypass that. But typically, I would say these interviews shouldn't be more than 15 to 20 minutes because most people are not going to give you more than 15 to 20 minutes of their time. But yeah, that's what I would say.
I
And if
love
you
that.
know your audience and you have people in mind, like by all means, you can absolutely make those direct asks. Like I'm sure people here already have their established businesses and you probably have some great clients that will give you 15 to 20 minutes of their time. But make sure you're focusing on the ideal ones, not just anybody.
Beautiful. And for everybody listening to, if you are recording it on Zoom, you can record it. You can click that AI companion at the bottom and it will actually summarize your entire meeting in notes. So it'll make it even easier to go through the content.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so now we understand our audience. We understand the problems that they will pay to solve. Now we need to productize our services. All right, so I don't know if anybody who has found good, fast, and cheap in a single product, but typically it's usually 2 of the 3. So it can be good and fast, it can be good and cheap, or it can be cheap and fast. It's not typically all 3 of these things. So you need to decide what you want to show up in. In-N-Out Burger, yes. Yes, that's a great example, right? Figure out where you want to play here and also make sure that this aligns with where your audience wants to be, right? Again, if your audience is Fortune 500 CEOs, they're probably not looking for poor quality, right? Well, I guess it probably depends. Maybe they also like In-N-Out Burger, who knows? But take a look at this, where these things intersect and find out where you want to play. All right, now I'm going to start talking about numbers a little bit because we need to talk about numbers before we get into productized services. So oftentimes in order to build a productized service, we have to create our process. So if you have not yet documented your process, take the time to document everything. One of the things that we help our clients do is really get clear on what that process looks like, because if you do not create a process, then you cannot repeat the thing that you do. Right. And if you cannot repeat the thing that you do, then you are the only one that can do it. And it is entirely reliant on your time, your energy, and your expertise. And therefore, it's not scalable at all. So take the time to document your process. And then after you've documented your process, then we're going to talk about how we tie numbers to it, right? So taking a look at some of these like basic business accounting terms, right? We've got revenue. Everybody knows what revenue is. That's your top line income. We have cost of goods sold, so COGS. Those are the expenses required to produce the things that you sell, right? So whether that's equipment or contractors or specific software, whatever that looks like. And then when you take revenue minus your COGS, then you have adjusted gross income, so AGI. AGI is the amount of money you have left to run the rest of your business. Now, a lot of people talk about increasing the profit in their business, and I feel strongly against that because profit is what you get taxed on. I believe you should be looking to strategically maximize your expenses so that you can leverage your business to pay for your life and get taxed on as little as possible. Now, always do it legally. There's a lot of fun like tax strategies and loopholes that we talk about and we work with our clients on. But you want to strategically maximize your expenses so that you then have minimal taxable profit at the end of the day. Now, I bring this up because we have this fancy spreadsheet that I've lived and died by for the last number of years. Because oftentimes when I do this exercise with people and they talk about the deliverables that they have to offer the world, they very much forget so many of the steps to doing it. So this is why I say you need to create the process. And then when we do this exercise with each individual, we go through and every single line item is a step of your process. And if it's all you, that's fine. If it's all you, and then you have a VA that comes in, and then you have a partner that comes in, like everyone needs their own line item in this process because you need to assign a rate to each one of these people. Now, again, I'm not one that I do not endorse nor do I support doing trading time for money, but like starting with a starting point from an hourly rate, just so you can start to see like how does these numbers add up. Then take a look at how much time, and I do like a min max because in many cases, like there's a little bit of variation there. How often does this happen? And then we calculate all this. So we can take a look at like all of the COGS that happen now. COGS come up in a big way if you're outsourcing the work. Like I used to build a bunch of websites for my agency. And so taking a look at like, what does it cost me to build a website? And therefore, how much am I going to charge for it? If this is mostly just you, then COGS does not really matter because it's just your time. But you can take a look at how this all adds up. And every single time I've done this with a client, they take a look at how these numbers add up and they'll go, oh, I should be charging so much more. Or I need to figure out how I spend less time doing this thing. And that only happens if you create a process and you productize and you standardize the work that you do. So again, talking about understanding your audience, understanding the problems they solve, creating your process to solve that problem because you're an expert in solving that problem, and then productizing those services. So this is an example of some of our productized services. We'd always talk about like, how do you get a starter product out there? What are your standard offerings? And then what are scalable offerings? So for us, we have something where we call the CEO hotline. Oftentimes what works best for our business is they get a chance to speak with me and I can help solve a problem for them. And this is a 30 or 60-minute discovery call. Well, not a discovery call, but they come, they say, I have this problem. Great. I'll help you solve it in 30 to 60 minutes. That builds trust with them so they get to know, like, and trust me. And then oftentimes that will lead into one of our standard offerings. So we have a year-long offering. We call it the Make Business Personal Experience, where I do a lot of one-on-one work, helping people go through the DNA of success and building their business models, infrastructures, and strategies, and then coaching with them and putting them into the Accelerator program. Our Accelerator program is just shy of a 6-month program, which I'll tell you a little bit more about before we wrap up today. And that has a series of different guest speakers. It's a group program. It has one-on-one coaching. We have dozens and dozens of templates and SOPs, etc. And that's a cohort-based program, right? So those are our standard offerings. And then scalable offerings, I do half-day intensives every now and again. And then the CEO hotline, again, I can continue to scale that. And if I wanted, I could bring in somebody else to take on those CEO hotline calls. And then we have masterminds, retreats, and we have an alumni community for our accelerator program. So those are scalable and sometimes passive revenue opportunities that help us to continue that customer journey, because we all know it's easier to keep a customer as a repeat customer than to acquire a new one, right? And that allows them to have some runway and work with us in a capacity that works for us, helps us productize our services, and also adds value to them. So this is just an example of like what this could look like. And so take this and apply it however it makes the most sense for your business.
Kiley, can I ask real quick on this?
Yeah.
How quickly do you think somebody should build out their product suite with like this many offers if they're just starting out? Do you think that this is something like having this many options is something that they should wait to create once they have like a solid client base and consistent recurring revenue? Because I think sometimes what I find is if you add too many options at once, then you are kind of like flip-flopping between different things to sell or share or offer, and like none of the single offers get enough time for your people to like really grow accustomed to what it is that you do.
Yes, that's a great question. I would say start with a standard offer and then find like one piece of that that can be a starter. right? So that way you're not like reinventing the wheel, but create like like I just worked with a client and we built out like a 6-month program, but she was like, I can do this one piece that starts at the very beginning of my process in 4 weeks. It's like, okay, let's pull that out because that way somebody can kind of test drive you and see like, do I know, like, and trust you? Oh, yes, I do. Okay, now I want in on the next thing, right? So great question, Ava. For example, for us, we started our one-on-one program. That's how we started. And then we iterated from there. So we did our one-on-one program. From there, we did group retreats and workshops. And then we expanded that into the accelerator program. So it all kind of built upon each other, but now it meets people at different price points. It has, you know, different cadences and different values and benefits. And then I would also say too, don't worry too much about building out scalable services until you get your standard ones in place. Oftentimes what you'll learn as you learn more about your audience and the things that matter most to them is you will start to learn what is a natural extension of the work that you do and still serves them. So great question. Thank you for that. All right, I'm going to keep moving because we've still got some more content to go through and we're running close on time. We still got some time, but we're going to get through it. All right, so the next thing that I want to tackle here is how do I generate leads? So as I mentioned, I've spent at this point nearly 20 years as a digital content marketer. And so I'm going to talk to you about content strategy. I'm not going to talk about ads right here. I'm going to talk to you about organic content. How do we go about this? I think that first and foremost, again, you need to know your audience. You need to know the questions that they ask. Then we talk about creating original content because sometimes content creation can be overwhelming. And then you need to have a strong CTA, call to action. So when we're talking about content marketing, first and foremost, you need to add value. Be a friend first, stop selling. General rule of thumb is 80% of the content that you put out into the world should be adding value to your audience. 20% should be asking them to do something about it, right? So to facilitate an action. Now you could be, or to 20% should be selling. 80% should be adding value, 20% should be selling. You should always be facilitating an action. So what does that mean, right? That means that you could be asking them to download something, sign up for an email list, attend a webinar, whatever it looks like, right? Attend a class, whatever that looks like, but facilitate some kind of action. If all you do is just say like, oh, here's all the good things that I have to offer you, but I give you no way to engage with me, you're missing an opportunity there. And keep in mind that this is all about them. It's not about you. So often, I think, especially as owners and, you know, depending on personality types, our egos and our personal brands can sometimes get in the way. At the end of the day, that all needs to be put to the side and you need to put your audience first and foremost, which again is why it's so important to really understand them and understand the problems they solve. Now, this next slide that I'm going to show you, this is a framework that we've built to try to simplify content creation process because sometimes it can be, like I said, overwhelming. So we call this the TLC wheel, the thought leadership content wheel. So first and foremost, what we do is we start with one original piece of content. So if right now you're saying, okay, well, I'm doing a blog post, I'm doing podcasts, I have a book, and I do a webinar series, I would say, okay, maybe we should streamline some of those things and see how we can focus on one original content piece and use those other avenues to slice and dice content from. And I'll walk through an example with you in just a moment here. So I want you to think about like, what does that one big meaty piece of content, so it could be a podcast, it could be a book, it could be all the things, right? What does that look like that you can like pull all these ideas out of? And how often do you do that? So if it's a book, you probably create it once, right? Or you update it. Maybe you do updates and revisions. If it's a podcast, are you doing it daily, weekly? Is it a series? Like, what does that look like, right? And then we look at how we slice and dice little bits and pieces of that content and we distribute it. Typically, that's through email, advertising, PR, and social. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you should be on every single social media channel. I don't believe that that's true. I think you need to understand where your audience is and meet them where they're at. Typically, we see that this is usually email and like 1 to 2 social channels, generally speaking. for the most part. Then take a look at how does that cadence show up for you? Is that on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, etc.? And then content amplification. So as you put that content out into the world, you want to amplify and always drive traffic back to that original piece of content, right? So we'll go through an example of this, but you can do this from a PR standpoint. You can do this from ads, and then tagging people in social media and all that kind of stuff, collaborating, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so let's walk through an example of how this kind of breaks down. And this is another visual that kind of shows you, like, if, for example, we started with a podcast, right? Podcast has audio, podcast oftentimes now also has video. So now we have podcast and video. We can slice and dice this content into so many different ways, right? We can use AI to create videograms. We can use AI in many cases to transcribe our podcast into blog posts. We can create different video clips with that and stick them in different webinars or an infographic, or embed it in our email marketing, or use this to post to YouTube and create playlists and like all this kind of stuff, right? From one podcast episode. So there's a lot of different things that we can do. So we're going to use podcast as an example here. So let's say our original piece of content is a podcast. So our podcast, we invite our guests onto our podcast. We promote the benefits of everything that we do. We add gated content to our website so that we are attracting and gathering email addresses. And we want to launch email campaigns to nurture once people download those things. Now, how do we slice and dice that content? So we could take that podcast, like I said, we could turn it into a blog post. We could design content for social media. We could create videograms and audiogram snippets. We could push it out via email. We could include the links to all the downloads that we talk about, right? And then we spread that word, right? We're tagging all of our guests. We're tagging any relevant companies or media outlets, etc. We could potentially partner with different people or entities, and then share the content that they're in, tag others who might find that content of interest, right? So that's just one real quick high-level example of how we can kind of tackle all of that. And then again, here's an example of a structure of how this could break down and provide like a monthly editorial calendar. I'm not saying this is what you have to do. I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. I'm just saying this is an example. So let's say it was a podcast episode, right? Let's say at the beginning of the podcast episode, you say, this is what we're talking about, and this is the problems that, this is why we're talking about it. This is why you should care as the listener. This is what is being said. Maybe there's some myths to bust, so we're going to ruffle some feathers here. And now you're going to give them your insights, your solution, etc., right? And you're going to break this down, say, into like you have 4 things to say about this one specific topic. And so therefore you can take each of these topics. And then you have a strong call to action. And if it's a podcast, maybe you have a quick boiler template in your show notes, and then you also link to your social channels, right? So one of the ways you can do this then is you take your solution. So you take these 4 topics and you pull these apart into content that you can post either on a weekly basis within your social media, or you can, maybe this is your entire week of social media. So if it's like one topic and it's like, okay, here's a stat. Here is a quote from somebody else, and here's my own opinion on it, right? Now you can take those and create little chunks of content and sprinkle that throughout your social media and editorial calendars. And you get all of this from one potential episode. So depending on how frequently you want to do this, that's just one example of how you could go about it. So think about what type of original content you want to be focusing on. Again, if you have like a book, you can take all of your chapters, pull those apart and push those out. You could take a book, you could record podcast episodes on the chapters of your book, right? So like there's different ways you can take a look at it, but streamlining your focus to one original piece of content can really help to simplify your content marketing strategy. And then the last topic that we're going to touch on here, and then I think we might still have a couple minutes for questions if there are any questions at the end. How do I close new clients? So we've talked about understanding our audience. We've talked about the problems they solve. We talked about productizing our services. We've talked about content marketing to generate leads. And now how do I close new clients? I will tell you, I am not a sales expert, but I have worked with many. I have asked a lot of questions, and I have cobbled together a process for myself, which I'm going to share a bit about discovery calls with you right now. So first and foremost, first and foremost, create a sales process, right? Create your sales process. And if your business is reliant on speaking to each person that you're talking through, great. If it's not, then you can probably run ad campaigns, figure out what your cost per acquisition looks like, and pummel ad spend into a campaign to close new clients. If you're working on like a service-based initiative, then you most likely want to speak with somebody so you can understand what their challenges are. So book the discovery call and get curious. I was just talking to a client about this yesterday. It sometimes, if you're not comfortable with sales, having those discovery calls can feel really scary and overwhelming. But my greatest piece of advice is just stay curious. Like, be in the moment with your prospect and try your best to just really understand what's going on with them. And then you're going to solve their problem after you understand and really hone in on what they're trying to solve. If it's something that you can solve, give them a story. We call it a bedtime story, right? So solve their problem by telling a convincing story based off of a previous experience. And then make sure you're always asking for the sale and ask for the next step. I have a friend that says, you don't GET what you don't ASK, right? So you have to ask for what you want and ask for the next step. So depending on what your sales process looks like, this next step could say, I'd love to go through a proposal conversation with you in a week or 2 weeks. I'm going to send over a contract for you right now. Here's the link to register, like whatever that looks like. Make sure you're getting that next step of commitment before you hop off of that conversation. So this next slide, for anybody who is taking a look, you might want to just screenshot this. It's a whole rundown of all of the types of questions that you might consider asking in a discovery call. I'm not saying you have to ask all of them, but I will run through some of the top ones I think are most important. So first and foremost, get them talking about their goals and their future, right? What do they want? If you don't understand what they want, then you can't possibly advise them, right? Then you're really playing to your own agenda. So you need to talk about what they want and ask them to talk about their business or whatever challenges they're running into and the goals they have for the future. Then ask them, what challenges are you running into, right? So, okay, now I know where you want to go. What's keeping you from getting there? Awesome. Asking them what they've tried thus far gives you a great opportunity to understand, how committed are they to solving this problem? Like if they haven't really tried anything yet, okay, fine, maybe this is a new challenge. If they're like, this has been going on for 3 years, but like, meh, not a big deal. Okay, well, that tells you a lot too. This also gives you an opportunity for them to say, hey, I tried working with somebody like you and it didn't really work out. That's a great opportunity for you to say, really, can you tell me why that specific scenario did not work out for you? And that gives them an opportunity to say, well, I didn't like how they approached it this way. They didn't listen to me here. They pushed their own agenda over here. It took way too long. It was too expensive, blah, 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 blah. Now that gives you a lot of information so you can tailor the rest of the conversation to either address those pain points and how you don't do it that way, or how your approach is different, etc. Right? We bring up this magic wand question again, because it's so important. Again, give them the opportunity to tell you exactly how they want to have it happen. Now, maybe they say, I don't know, and I will be looking to you to tell me how to make this happen. Okay, awesome. That's where you bring in that process that you created, right? The process that you've run through, and you're like, this is how we do this. We solve this problem in 3 simple steps, A, B, C. This is what it looks like, etc. Right? Now, so you talk to them about the magic scenario. Okay, in a perfect world, this is what this looks like. Okay, cool. So this is where the bedtime story comes in. So if I'm understanding you correctly, this is the problem that you're wrestling with. Okay, awesome. I'm pretty familiar with this because we've actually worked with a handful of clients that have run into this exact same situation. And this is what they were struggling with. This is how we helped them. This is the process we went through with them. This was the outcome of what happened. Is that something that you're looking for as well, or is some type of similar situation? Most likely, if you've nailed it and really listened, they will probably say yes. Say, okay, great. Now this next section of questions, I think is nice to have. If you're running low on time, you can maybe skip through some of these. But trying to understand the urgency of this, like, does this need to be solved tomorrow, or is it being solved by the end of the year? right? What are the consequences of not getting this solved? You know, if somebody, I was working with one client, and you know, they're looking to get funding. It's like, okay, well, if we don't get XYZ in place in the next 3 months, then we're sacrificing almost $500,000 in funding, right? So, okay, cool. Now you know, like, what is the value of getting this in place at that point? And then also understanding those time frames. So like if we were able to help you accomplish X, right, in the time frame that you're looking to do it, like what would that be worth to you? And just hear what they have to say, right? That's when you can then say, okay, good news. We've done this type of work for people just like you. Based off of what you've shared, I think that this would be the right process to follow. Here's our productized service. This is what that process looks like. This is what you can expect. Okay, I've tossed a lot at you. You know, what questions do you have? Talk through that with them and then ask them, how would you like to move forward? So what does that next step look like? If they're like, I'm sold, great, send me the link. I want to sign up now. Awesome. Or maybe it's, okay, I'd love to have a deeper conversation with you because now I know more about what your challenges are. Let me put this together and I'd love to talk to you in a week and kind of present my proposal, whatever that looks like. But getting that commitment before you hop off of that call is super, super important. Okay, so that was a lot of content, and I know I was speaking fast because I was trying really hard to get through everything. But at the end of the day, I just want to give you this friendly reminder that this is your life, this is your business. And if you are going to spend so much time working in it, please make business personal so that you are living the life that you want. Now, I have one quick offer just to toss out there for you if it's of interest or valuable to anybody here. We have, like I mentioned earlier, we have taken a one-on-one program and has transformed it into multiple iterations. And we now have a digital program we call the Accelerator. It is just shy of a 6-month program. You get 3 one-on-one coaching sessions. You've got office hours. You learn not only from me, but we bring in 15 different guest speakers to talk to you about everything from sales and marketing and lead generation and accounting and legal and personal branding and HubSpot automations and operations and financial strategies and tax strategies and planning and all kinds of stuff, right? So at the end of the program, you're no longer saying, I don't know what I don't know. But you can say, okay, I know all of these things now, and I have the tools, resources, and people to be successful in implementing them. This is on-demand content, so we release it 1 week at a time so it doesn't overwhelm you. We have weekly live discussions, so you get a chance to speak with me and Amanda, my co-facilitator, each week, and then we bring in all of the guest speakers. So you have a chance to speak directly with each of the guest speakers and ask questions that are specific to you and your business. We have about 20 to 30 people in this cohort. They're all women, all professional service-based women owners. And then we have a digital platform. We are building what is soon to be just shy of a 300-page workbook for this program. So it is very much like a business Bible. We have dozens of SOPs and templates so that you can really streamline the back-end operations of your business. And then after people go through this program, we also then have a path for them. If they want to continue in their cohort, they can continue in a mastermind. We are building a pretty robust alumni community. And then next year, we hope to offer an in-person annual retreat. So just a quick, this is a quick overview of all of our different experts coming in from all over the country. They're all women business owners, so they can commiserate with being a business owner. They all have deep areas of expertise in the thing that they do, and they're here dedicated to support the women in this program. I have relationships with every single one of these people, so I can vouch for their characters. And I would love to offer a special discount for the Academy of Breath community. So the best thing to do there is book a discovery call with me because I want to talk to you and make sure that it is the right fit for you. We actually also today, we are having our very last accelerator webinar. So if you're listening to this and you're like, ooh, I am interested, we are having one more accelerator webinar informational session today. So if you want to join us for that, that would be awesome. But otherwise, book a discovery call with me and would love to chat with you. We are starting our next cohort on July 9th. So we will be cutting off registrations at the end of this month. And I have a special promo offer for the lovely folks in this community over the next couple of weeks. So please grab some time with me. And Ava, we did it with just a couple minutes to spare. So if there are any additional questions, we've got some time to go through whatever might have come up.
I love it. I am just in awe of how much knowledge you have and how tactical it is, yet at the same time, going back to the title of this masterclass, how personal it's meant to be as well too. So I'm just so appreciative. Everybody, if you're here live, please say thank you in the chat. It took a lot to put this together, and excuse me, now your throat's rubbing off on me.
Sorry.
It takes a lot to put this extensive of a masterclass together, and Kiley gave us her time, her knowledge, and the years and years of wisdom that she has gained through her own business, but working with so many other service providers and businesses. So thank you so much. For everybody that is here, we went through a lot today. So we're going to be sending out the recording of this. And I highly suggest going back through, pausing, doing these exercises. Sometimes it can feel a little bit grueling to go through and do some of this foundational work, but I promise you, it will change everything. Just the other day, I went back and did a brand new exercise on identifying and really pinpointing who my ideal client is for the Academy of Breath. And since then, it has made creating content easier. It has made emails easier. It has made me showing up and just sharing unapologetically about what we do even easier. And so it's very foundational work. And yes, it is going to take time, but it has a ripple effect into how you feel in business. And as y'all know, I'm really big on the energetics. And if we don't feel passionate, if we don't feel confident, if we don't feel excited about what we're doing, then it's going to be harder to sell. We're going to feel like an imposter when we're showing up with our clients, and it's just not going to work as easily as it could if you were to take this time, make business personal, and really enjoy the process of building. So Kiley, again, I just appreciate you so much for coming into our community and sharing. If everyone here can go follow Kiley, at least on social media, that would be amazing. But definitely pull your phones out and schedule a call with her if you're interested in their accelerator program, because it's pretty badass. And she's shown me a lot about what they do inside. And the 6 months of having this type of in-depth support surrounded by other women is really, really valuable. So Kiley, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, beautiful. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us live. Like I said, you're going to get the replay. We are going to send it out to everybody. So if you're watching this on replay, there should still be time, hopefully, to be able to get inside of the accelerator. Just reach out to Kiley, though. Kiley, where can people find you? What is the best email and space for people to connect with you with if they are reaching out from the replay?
Yes, absolutely. So find me on LinkedIn. It's just my name, Kiley Peters. I'm also on Instagram, same handle, Kiley Peters. And my email is kiley@rayneix.com. So Rain9.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right,
Thank you.
everybody. Enjoy your day. We'll see you soon. And thanks for being here live.